Life Audio.
Welcome to the Team Us podcast, where we share how grace, commitment, and cooperation can help couples live the everyday moments of marriage together. Hey everyone, we're Ted
and Ashleigh Slater. Today we are sharing 4 strategies for safeguarding your marriage from affairs. Ted.
Yes.
One of the shows that we've been watching lately as a family is Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah. That's a good show to go through as a family.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, yes, we are nerds. And if you aren't a fellow nerd, please don't stop listening to this episode because we're kicking it off.
We're not only talking about nerdy things.
Right. Yeah. I'm going somewhere by talking about Doctor Who.
Got it.
Too. So stick with it.
Got it.
Is what I'm saying.
And this is an older season. Season 10?
Yeah. Well, we started, I Googled it. It was on for 26 years or something like that. I could be wrong. Jeez. If you are a Doctor Who super fan and I'm wrong, give me grace.
We're stuck on David Tennant.
Yeah, we started with the revival of the show, which started around 2005. But we skipped the 9th Doctor, where that debuted, and we went straight to the 10th Doctor because it was David Tennant. And we'd seen him in BBC's 80 Days Around the World.
Which is really good. Really good.
I think we should rewatch it after we're done.
I think you're right.
Watching Doctor Who.
It was so good. It was fun. Anyway, so what are we talking about?
Well, first I have to admit that something that I realize is kind of silly now.
I like silly.
So before I actually watched Doctor Who, and maybe into the first few episodes we watched, I thought his name was Doctor Who.
Oh.
I didn't realize his name was...
Like Horton Hears a Who, kind of.
Yeah, but that's not Horton's name. I mean, I thought his name was Doctor Who, not, he's the doctor, and people are like, who?
Got it. A mysterious doctor. The doctor.
Right. But we actually, so you, at one point, Googled, the most popular episodes.
Yes.
And one of the most popular episodes is called Blink.
One of the top, 10 of all the episodes. Yeah.
Yeah. And we didn't skip ahead to it. We naturally came to it because David Tennant is in that one.
And it was exceptional. It was so well written and acted and everything. It just came together. It was so good.
Right. Well, and it's the one with the Weeping Angels.
The Weeping Angels.
So I actually hadn't heard of the Weeping Angels until this summer. Our girls did a production of Mary Poppins Jr. And one of the roles that Dorothy had, our youngest, was as a park statue. And the director wanted the statues.
It's a step up from a tree.
We have had a daughter be a tree. Yeah. Well, the director wanted the statues to have Weeping Angel style wigs. And I had no idea what that meant.
No idea.
So I looked it up and I did make her one. Turns out I was the only statue mom who actually made a Weeping Angel wig. Everybody else bought theirs off Amazon.
Weak.
Yeah. And it didn't turn out exactly how I wanted because it kind of shrunk as I glued it all together. And then I had to add some stuff that, I don't know, I think took away from the aesthetic. Anyway. So, Ted, you and those listening are probably wondering what this has to do with today's topic on safeguarding your marriage.
Right.
Well, there's a scene in this episode, Blink, where the main character, Sally Sparrow, who I always think of Jack Sparrow. I don't know why, but that's a tangent.
That's a big tangent.
Yes, is in this abandoned house, and she notices some writing under partially peeling wallpaper. So she starts pulling it off the wall to reveal it. And the first thing it says is, so this is a spoiler alert, by the way, if you have not watched this episode. The first thing it says is, beware of Weeping Angel, which at this point does not make sense to Sally.
No.
So she keeps pulling the wallpaper off, and next she reads, oh, and duck. But she doesn't duck. Instead, she keeps pulling the wallpaper off. Next it reads, really, duck. Still.
She keeps pulling the wallpaper off.
Yeah, she still doesn't duck. Finally, she reads, Sally Sparrow, duck now. And she finally ducks just as something is thrown at her head. And it turns out, another spoiler alert, that the doctor had written this for her. But
He's a time traveler. He goes back in time and forward in time.
Yeah. But, so what do Doctor Who, Weeping Angels, and Sally Sparrow have to do with safeguarding your marriage? They directly relate to the first strategy we're going to share, but we're going to do that after this break. So, Sally was slow to heed the doctor's advice.
Well, I mean, I would be too in that circumstance. I'd be like, this is interesting. I'm just peeling this off the wall. But once it's addressing her by name, you kind of shock out of your...
Yeah, I guess that's true. See, I am such a rule follower. I think if I read it, I would, even if I was still peeling the wallpaper, I'd be ducking while I'm doing it.
Crouching or something.
Yes. Okay. I would be like, wait a minute, this is weird. What do I need to duck from? Although I might have left at the Beware of the Weeping Angel section instead of continuing to go, because I'm a little bit of a scaredy cat probably in that sort of circumstance. But so Sally was slow to heed the doctor's advice. And I think sometimes married couples can be the same. You know, there's this belief that an affair could never happen to us. I mean, we've had friends over the years that have thought that.
Throughout the years, yeah.
Yeah. And so they didn't safeguard against it. And so strategy 1 that I want to talk about is to realize and admit that you are not immune. So I think that we have always agreed together that we're not some magical exception when it comes to temptation, you know?
Right.
Like, what are you look like you want to say something.
No, keep going. It's a touchy subject, so I need to sort of guard my words more than I typically do.
Yeah, that's probably true. But I mean, we haven't stopped with that. We've taken that reality and allowed it to motivate us to actively safeguard against affairs. We've been quick to beware of the weeping angels, so to speak, and duck. Or, I mean, Scripture very clearly when it talks about, I know a lot of affairs start emotionally.
Sure.
But Scripture is
even
very...
innocently, just emotional connection and maybe a little wink in the eye, a little, flirtatiousness, or just having fun together. You're building fun memories together, which in itself is not necessarily wrong, but fun memories lead to wanting to make more fun memories. And so I know that a lot of them start that way, but I mean, Scripture tells us when it comes to sexual immorality, it says flee. Yeah.
It doesn't say test how strong you are.
Yeah.
Flee. So
you can when it's not such a pull, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're both like, what do we say next here?
Yeah.
And I do want to stress, as we talk about, this one, I started out by saying you and I talked about this together and agreed together, that we need to have safeguards. And so this is a team effort. If one of you is doing it and the other one doesn't want to, it can't be one of you safeguarding and the other one's not.
No.
So it does have to
You gotta be in agreement.
Right. You have to be on the same page. And I would think
agreement.
If one of you, if your spouse is a little reluctant to agree to safeguards, maybe you need to dig into that. I'm not a counselor, but that would give me pause.
Yeah, why wouldn't they be?
Right.
If your marriage is the most important human relationship you got,
yeah,
you should.
All right.
Anyway.
So number 2. Choose your close friends or your confidants wisely.
Why would that be?
Well, I mean, I don't think there's nothing innately wrong with you having friends who are women. There's nothing innately wrong with me having friends who are men. But here's the thing. Neither of us should have close friends or confidants of the opposite sex, unless it's like your sister. I don't have any brothers. But I think it's unwise to put yourself in a position where you are emotionally connecting at that level with someone of the opposite sex.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking, we've got some couple friends, and I'm not merely friends with the couple. I'm friends with, the husband, and a little bit with the wife, friendly terms, but with the man, I go to lunch with them or laugh with them and make connections with them. I don't really do anything with their wives.
Well, you talk gardening or cooking.
Sure.
Or you do engage conversations, but you're not calling them and saying, hey, my work was really stressful today, or Ashley's really annoying me today.
Oh, my lands.
You're not connecting with them at an inappropriate level.
Yeah, those two examples are oof.
But I mean, if you're talking gardening or cooking or theater or whatever, politics, whatever, with another woman, I think that's fine. That's not it's not creating this deep emotional level. But if you're running to that person to confide in them or to connect with them, or maybe gain something that you don't feel like you're getting emotionally in your marriage, then there's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And this is actually something that many marriage experts and counselors have commented on also, because again, we are not counselors. We are mentors and friends. Dr. Dennis Rainey of Family Life says that one way to protect your intimacy is to avoid emotional adultery. And he gives a very helpful definition of emotional adultery and thoughts on how to avoid it when he writes this. He says, emotional adultery is friendship with the opposite sex that has progressed too far. When you begin to tell a friend of the opposite sex about your intimate struggles, doubts, or feelings, you are sharing your soul in a way that God intended exclusively for the marriage relationship, and it often leads to physical involvement. So that's what we were kind of talking about there. I think he said it more succinctly.
You're right.
And he says, to avoid it, set strict limits about the time you spend with those of the opposite sex, particularly in work situations, and reserve some subjects for your spouse. He says, Barbara and I are careful to share our deepest feelings, needs, and difficulties only with each other. And I don't think, from stories that I've heard, I don't think most affairs happen overnight, whether emotional or physical. It happens slowly. And I think having close friends or confidants of the opposite sex can set, someone up for an emotional affair that turns into a physical one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back to share 2 more strategies for safeguarding your marriage from an affair. All right. You ready for number 3?
I was born ready.
This is something you often mention, Ted, and that's the Billy Graham rule. Or, as it's more formally called, the Modesto Manifesto.
I've never heard... What?
Yeah.
It rhymes. I've never heard of that. Modesto.
You know me, I like to Google things.
Okay.
And we talk about this in the book Team Us, but do you want to unpack it?
I do. This one's... I know some people are like, it's legalism or it can be unloving or uncaring. Basically what it is, to the best of my ability, avoid like being... one-on-one kind of situation with somebody of the opposite sex. Is that kind of it? Like he was extreme, and some men are so extreme that they would not even get in an elevator with a woman if it was just the two of them, which is an extreme example, but I think that sort of illustrates the concept.
Right. And I don't think that you and I take it to that extreme thing. Like, yeah, you can have a conversation just you and another lady.
Right.
Or you've shared an office before.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually think of an example where we faced something like this and we had to talk it through.
Okay.
I think you were at a conference with a group. And some of the people left earlier weren't available. So it was you and one of the women who was still there. And I think she was like, hey, let's just have dinner. And so I think you were like, you called me because you were like, I'm not sure what to do in this situation. And we talked it through. And I think we decided, okay, we're both good with you just eating dinner with her.
Right.
And that was kind of the extent of because you were at a conference, busy restaurant. But that was one of those instances where normally that is not something you would do.
No, I wouldn't have any interest in that.
Right. And if you did it and didn't tell me about it or even like talk it out with me beforehand, then that would be...
It does feel a little fishy. Maybe we're just super hypersensitive to this.
Yeah, I don't think, having met her before, I don't think she meant anything by it. I think you guys were just... I think you guys were just...
Colleagues.
Both their colleagues. So I think it just kind of... depends. So it's not like a legalistic thing that we're following.
Right. And I think the example you gave is a good one, that like before I got together with this woman, I talked to you about it. Just so there's this transparency, not keeping secrets and so on.
And I think early in our marriage, I was still in grad school and I was working a student film, and I was like it was a producing role. I don't remember which producing role, but I think I had to like drive places with the producer sometimes.
Okay.
And he was a guy, but you knew that for work we were driving places, and it wasn't, and I think we're both very on guard in those situations too, that it's not something that keeps happening. It might be a one-off? Is that the right word?
Sure.
Some
people would say, I think, that if you practice this Billy Graham rule, that you may miss opportunities to I don't know, to be a blessing or to serve or to help somebody who may be, going through something difficult. And my thought is, yeah, okay, well, I missed the opportunity. So what? It's kind of cold, but, I just don't even want to go there. If some woman's hurting and struggling and needs help, well, I'm not the one to help her.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
it's not my responsibility.
And I mean, there's going to be people listening who are like, but I have to work closely with someone of the opposite sex.
Sure.
Okay, well,
and
then
maybe you have to work late into the night on a project or something.
Put safeguards in place. Don't close the office door when you're working. Or, you've often, when you did have to share an office with a woman at one point, you were like, Ashleigh, you need to become friends with her.
Yeah.
And I did. And I absolutely love her.
Yeah. And it wasn't that I anticipated anything would happen, because nothing was going to happen. But I still, wanted you to be involved in the situation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, because again, as we pointed out at the beginning of the conversation, we've had friends going to church, in our lives who've, been unfaithful.
Right.
It happens in the real world, not just on TV.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it happens. I don't want it to happen to us.
No. Mm-mm.
Although I don't think I'm as alluring as I used to be. So I'm not thinking too highly of myself, but I'm still...
Yeah. So I think, if you're listening and you're like, have to work with someone, figure out, you and your spouse talk about it. Figure out how you can put safeguards in place that also allow you to do your job.
There you go.
We don't have specific wisdom on that because we both work from home right now. So,
Right.
And most of the time you've worked in a cubicle in a big room.
Right.
Yeah.
A cubicle.
All right. So number 4, don't have secrets. So, for example, we know each other's passwords. We can log into each other's phones or laptops. We can track each other's locations.
I mean, I don't have anything to hide. What would I hide?
Well, maybe that you went to Burger King and got your Whopper Wednesday.
Well, Whopper Wednesday, they're on sale.
I know, but that's not what I'm talking about. Do I ever go to Chick-fil-A and not tell you? Sure.
What?
Occasionally. But I'm not
about this.
I'm not talking those kind of things. You might get together with a buddy and he might confide in you. Do you need to tell me everything he says? No, you don't. Because I don't need to.
That's an interesting point. I'm going to be getting together with some of my guy friends this coming week. And if they mention anything in confidence, typically I would share anything with you. But in those cases, is it best that I not share with my wife? I think
here's my perspective on this. And I think a couple might need to work this out because my general policy is don't ask me to keep a secret from you.
Right.
That's my policy. Don't specifically ask me not.
Because then you're going to be like, oh, I will be sure that my husband knows what you're about to tell me.
Ask me to keep a secret from you. But also trust that I have discretion in the sense that I know what someone's telling me that you might need to know.
Right.
And what
would just be gossip. Maybe.
Right. Or you don't need to know that personal thing about how they're feeling. Or you wouldn't care what it is. So I think when it comes to those things, if you're getting together with a guy friend, use discretion. I'm not going to feel like you're keeping secrets from me if you don't tell me everything they said. Yeah. Because I understand I trust you to tell me what I need to know about that person. I
think we went on a tangent, but it's a pretty interesting tangent.
Well, I think that's about don't have secrets.
Right.
And that doesn't mean, we have to tell each other absolutely everything we hear throughout a day.
But I'm going to err on the side of being too transparent.
Yeah. Well, and I tend to tell you a lot of stuff too. But I do know, I'm like, okay, he wouldn't care about this, or this is something maybe a friend is feeling or going through that he doesn't need to know.
Yeah. I can see some instances where that would be the case.
Right. And I think, I have found that with fellow married friends, they understand basically whatever I tell you, you can tell your husband. And I tell people that when I'm like if I'm getting together with a friend and I'm confiding, I will often be like, okay, this is what we're going through. I'd rather you keep this to yourself. But of course, I'm not asking you to keep it from your spouse. Whatever I tell you, you can tell your husband whatever you want. So All right. Well, those are the 4 that I have. Do you have anything to add to them?
No, I think those have served us well over the decades.
Yeah. And it's not, the hard thing is addressing this topic in general is not a simple, I don't think it's a simple one to address.
No. Because again, we've got friends who are literally, or have literally walked through, unfaithfulness.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing. It's bewildering.
And in most of the cases, there has been repentance and they have fought for restoration and reconciliation, but that hasn't been the case in all of them. And I think those are the ones that it's hard. It's heartbreaking.
It's a death. It's a death of a relationship.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So to recap, here are some strategies for safeguarding your marriage from affairs. 1, recognize you are not immune from temptation and set safeguards because of that. So you safeguard your marriage by setting safeguards. I realize it's kind of a, yeah. 2, choose your close friends or confidants wisely, meaning pick people that if you're going to emotionally confide in, it's either your spouse or it's friends of the same sex. Yeah. 3, follow Billy Graham's example in just being mindful and careful of how and when and how much time you're spending with people of the opposite sex, alone specifically, and reject keeping secrets.
Great.
So after this break, we'll be back with this week's Us Time Challenge. Okay.
Yes.
So for this week's Us Time Challenge, I would love for those listening to sit down and talk through with your spouse what safeguards you have in place. And if you don't have any, establish some and agree on them.
Absolutely. That's a great conversation to have.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us on the Team Us podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, and we'd love to have you leave a review over at Apple Podcasts. We're looking forward to next time as we keep talking about how grace, commitment, and cooperation can help couples live the everyday moments of marriage together.
Team Us with Ted and Ashleigh Slater is a production of Life Audio and Salem Media. If you liked what you heard today, please take a second to rate and review the podcast in your favorite podcast app so that more listeners like you can find the show. For more faith-filled, inspirational podcasts, visit us at lifeaudio.com.